Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this video we're going to be covering 5-cent HEX. Now what? Remember, if you like this kind of quantitative and technical hybrid analysis, leave a thumbs up, be subscribed by the end of the video if you haven't already, and let's go ahead and analyze these charts. Okay, so we've been making videos for a while now, right? And we called this bottom, more or less. We made a video titled 2-cent HEX, now what? 3-cent HEX, now what? And 4-cent HEX, now what? And this video, I'm sure you saw it coming, is 5-cent HEX. So the question is, now what? Okay, well, if you look at, and we mentioned this in our prior video, if we looked at where we wicked up to, it was actually 6 cents. So if you got your order filled at 6 cents, congratulations. Or not, because you can buy, 10% more. And looking at how expensive gas fees on Ethereum are right now, I don't even know if you break even, man. So let's check out a few of these charts that I wanted to talk about, right? So we reached 5-penny HEX, and what does that correspond to on our regression rainbow? Well, essentially, we reached the yellow curve, right? And once we close our daily candle today, we'll get a better idea of where exactly we're closing. And maybe the next video is called Code Yellow, right? Because you can see how close we are to our yellow curve. Very, very close. And remember, we talked about this fractal for a bit, how maybe we see consolidation around one curve lower than the previous one, because we saw the fractal playing out essentially one curve lower and sort of slower. But I was wrong, right? I said we might consolidate around the 3 to 4 penny region. I was wrong, and I'll gladly admit when I'm wrong. However, these kind of occasions are what I'm happy to be wrong about, right? Because I was conservative in my estimates. And oftentimes I will be conservative in my estimates because at the end of the day, none of this is financial advice. And I don't want, even though I tell you guys not to trade, and the community's ethos is essentially, you know what? Maybe trading is the best option because historically holders have performed the best, even though I can do my best to disincentivize such behaviors. There are some people that are going to do it anyways, and if you just, are constantly calling for 20-penny HEX, $1 HEX, $10 HEX, like, it gets a little old. And not only that, it's like, let's be real. Let's look at the charts, see what's happened, see what might be able to happen again. And we've done pretty well doing that so far. Like, if you want the moon math, there are plenty of places you can go for that. And not to say I don't think HEX can reach these levels. I do. However, I think giving it more time than less time is generally a good thing to avoid things like disappointment and getting wrecked. Okay? So just be patient. Trust me that these higher price targets are in the cards. I just might not talk about them as often, right? However, we are in what you would call an expansion phase, right? That's basically a meme at this point. But it's true, right? Look at the fractal that played out back here, and we were going to cover this actually. Let me pull up the fractal. That it essentially is a fractal of the previous cup and handle plus expansion phase, right? Where we went up to this level, and we've covered this. We went up to this level of 12x from the beginning of this cup and handle, whereas we're currently, again, around 4x, and once we close the daily candle, then this will be updated. So, a few charts I want to look at. This is one of them because it tells us we still have room to grow. Obviously, the regression rainbow tells us we still have room to grow. I wanted to talk about specifically a couple charts. This one first, let's cover it, the HEX BTC chart. Because in prior videos, we've used this to measure, what have been historical levels of overvaluation on the HEX BTC pair. And we've talked about this plenty, the fact that, we might be able to reach 100 satoshis. Where are we now? Well, shit. Looks like we reached 100 satoshis per HEX, right? And it's easy math, right? Because Bitcoin is 55,000, so HEX at 5.5 cents. You see the 5.5, then you get that even 100 satoshis. So another point to bring up on here is a really good point that was brought up by Look Into Crypto a few times on his previous live stream, and that's this fact that after a big payday, which was, let's say, around here, this is a weekly chart, right? So everything to the left of this black vertical line was hyperinflationary, a hyperinflationary era for HEX, which essentially meant we were printing what, like 1 billion coins a day. Yeah, that's a lot. It's a lot. And that's why it's called hyperinflation, because it was essentially the period of time where you're going from zero of something, right? HEX didn't exist, to the total supply, or rather a supply that will then undergo a more constant, sustainable inflation rate. So everything from here to here was completely different supply dynamics than what we see from here to here. So to think, and again, this is looking to crypto's sort of thesis, is that these levels might not be as significant anymore, right? Because when you have 1 billion coins being printed per day, you have more sell pressure than when you only have like, so what's 3.69% annual inflation brought down to the daily? So all you really have to do is 3.69 divided by 365. So that's 0.01%. So divide that by 100 times approximately 570 billion coins, which turns out to be, 57 million coins. So we went from printing approximately 1 billion coins per day to now minting into this the supply only about 57 million coins a day. So a huge reduction. What is it, like a 20x reduction in supply, in inflation per day. So it makes sense that even though we reached 100 sats, 100 satoshis per hex, that maybe we could go higher, right? Because there's less sell pressure. You could argue 20 times less sell pressure, right? Which is a lot, okay? So even though it is significant and it is something to celebrate, hey, we reached 100 sats, that's a nice, even psychological level. Well, timing the top is dangerous. And again, looking to crypto's live stream kind of elucidated on that fact that, you know what, man, if you're trying to time the top during an expansion phase, be careful, because, for example, if you had attempted to time it, let's say on this previous expansion phase, let's just go ahead and pull this up. Like, let's say you try to time it and you thought this was the top, for example, right? That corresponds to somewhere around, I'm all over the place, right? Around here. Whereas, sure, you might have sold there, but there was still a run-up, and at the end of the day, where you sold at became the next price floor, right? So if you had sold, sooner, let's say you thought 0.0015 was the top and you were up, 10x, and you're happy about that. Well, if you want to buy back in, like I said, the floor of price for the ensuing months, almost a year, was 2 times higher. So it's difficult to time the top, even more so difficult to time it during what would be considered an expansion phase, right? Because no one knows where the top is going to be, right? We have tools to try to understand, predict where potential regions of, potential top regions could be, where they could be, but no one really knows, right? So again, even though it is significant, let's celebrate 100 sats per hex. I think it's pretty cool. This doesn't necessarily indicate too much, right? It might indicate some resistance, but at the end of the day, like I said, we were hyperinflationary back here, so the supply dynamics are completely different, which makes sense that then the price dynamics would also be different, because at the end of the day, price is directly correlated to supply and demand. Okay, one other chart I wanted to touch on was the liquidity chart on Uniswap v3. As we've mentioned in the past, you can have asymmetrical liquidity on Uniswap v3 as opposed to just purely symmetrical liquidity across all price ranges as we had on v2 and v1. And so that provides some sort of different behaviors you can act upon, right? You can act differently on this DEX version than in previous versions. And one thing I find very, very interesting, which is why I'm pointing this out in this video, is the liquidity distribution here that we see. Because in a previous video, if you remember, we talked about the liquidity distribution, and there was a huge spike up at 5 pennies, right? And during that video, I was kind of asking you guys, which, by the way, thanks a ton for commenting below in that video, because I was asking questions that I really had. Like, I was wondering what significance liquidity distributions had, and a lot of you guys helped educate me on what I had a hunch, right? That these are essentially limit orders at the end of the day. And it's true. It's right. That's correct. So back on topic, we had a liquidity spike around 5 pennies. That was much greater than what it looks like now. Sure, we do have a liquidity spike still around 5 pennies, but it's a little more distributed. It used to be just a thin, really tall spike, much taller than this, and now it's sort of spread out. And this is smart, right? Like we've been talking about, if you want to earn fees on your liquidity, then you have to provide your liquidity in the price range where price currently is, otherwise you're not earning fees. So it looks like liquidity providers are wisening up, because you see this, I guess, spike, you could call it, of liquidity between 4.7 cents approximately and 5.9, almost 6 cents, right, per hex. So given this liquidity range, if you are in this liquidity range with your liquidity, then you're earning fees, which is cool, right? Who doesn't want to earn fees? However, I find it interesting that a lot of liquidity has moved anywhere from the, where we mentioned the 4.7, almost 5 penny region, all the way up to this 31 or so penny region. That's a high price. I like high prices per hex. I don't know about you, but yeah, we have the majority of our liquidity here between, again, around 5 to 6 pennies, but then we also have this sort of even uniform distribution anywhere from 6 to 30 pennies or so, which I find very interesting, because again, these are effectively limit orders of people waiting to unload at higher prices, which I find bullish. And notice this interesting little kind of staircase. Right at 10 pennies, you have kind of this step up in liquidity where people want to provide, and you see this tiny one at 20 cents. So again, these psychological levels are relatively significant. They might not be extremely significant, but you see it in behaviors, right? Like, why else would this liquidity have like a small jump here at 10 cents and then another small jump at 20 cents? These even numbers are just, psychologically clean numbers that people like, just like 10K Bitcoin, 50K Bitcoin, all that stuff. That's why people are calling for 10K Ether. It's just a nice, even point to talk about. And if you scroll down, you can kind of see real time what people are doing. Swap hex for you. Someone just sold 26K worth of hex, and then someone bought 20K worth, sold 22K worth, bought 20K worth, etc. So you can see real time what's going on. But definitely, we've been on a tear, and it's kind of hard to do technical analysis on a straight line, right? So we will do our best to project where we might be going. Remember, our bull flag technical target was hit of 3 pennies, and then I said, you know what, guys, we've blown past technical targets in the past on an order of a little over 2x, right? And so maybe we will see 6 pennies, and lo and behold, we hit 6 pennies. Now, the fundamentals here are interesting because people are people are buying hex in the hopes of sacrificing it for this PulseChain launch, which it could be coming in a few days, right? Any day now. And then that will effectively become, or this is the speculation, right? That whatever hex is sacrificed into this sacrifice phase will be non-touched, right? So this will act sort of as a supply sink, which in theory should be good for price. So a lot of bullish things lining up. Currently at 5 pennies, 5.3 pennies, and there's no telling where the top is, right? It's hard to bet against momentum, and that's why even though we're hitting these technical targets, 3 pennies, 6 pennies, potentially, again, the next psychological level is 10 pennies, which doesn't seem too far away at this point. Well, it's tricky to tell where the top is. I'll just say that. So with that said, I'm pretty sure I covered everything I wanted to cover in this video. Oh no, one more thing. Definitely one more thing I wanted to cover is the HEX versus Ether. That's why I kind of stopped. I was like, wait, what else do I want to cover? It's this, right? It looks amazing. The HEX versus Ether ROI from launch, normalized ROI since launch, respectively. And as you can see, we are currently sitting at a little over 100x from launch price. Beautiful. And this is happening on around day 513 or so. This is slightly off from actual launch because I believe the actual launch was December 4th, 2019, but this is only charting market data starting around December 14th. So it's about 10 days off or so. So if you're like, wait, it's day 523 of HEX's existence, well, that's why this is kind of off. So we're 100 days, we're 100x, a little over 100x above our launch price, which on day 513, whereas for Ether, it took, day 657 or so to reach that level. So definitely about 20% faster. HEX is acting 20% faster. It's moving 20% faster than Ethereum was during its first 500-600 days from launch. And this is a chart I wanted to end up on, is the fact that, like I said, we've talked about price extension here on this HEX ETH ROI performance index is essentially, I'll explain it again, even though I've explained it in the past. If you map this green curve, which is Ethereum, to just a line, right? And then divide the HEX ROI by the Ether ROI, then you have this line for Ethereum, so you can more easily see whether HEX was underperforming or overperforming during that time. So it's a little more clear. And you can see that we reached a level of about 23.5x above Ethereum on day 146, and we are at 22x now. So we're fast approaching the highest level of extension we've ever been on this model, which corresponds to our local top of about 60% of a penny back in May of 2020. So we're quickly approaching. Again, one single data point isn't really enough to say, well, once we reach that, then we're going to start turning back. It's really not that easy. Just a single data point doesn't tell you much, although it might be slightly insightful to just kind of elucidate on how far extended we are on this model. And just for fun, let's go ahead and end on the HEX versus BTC, because we have completely blasted right through that. As you can tell, we were kind of choppy, consolidating around this level of equivalence on par with Bitcoin's ROI from launch, and now we just kind of had this spike, whereas it took Bitcoin like a month or so to have that spike from where we are today. So things are definitely getting very interesting, especially if you consider, well, this area of Bitcoin was more or less a bear market, right? We were coming out of the depths of a bear market, whereas the market conditions now are very different, in my opinion. Like, some people claim that we could be in a double peak cycle. So if you were to consider that, well, then Bitcoin is kind of in this area over here, I guess you could say, before, we've definitely been consolidating for a while. Some people are speculating maybe we'll consolidate a bit longer, hit the 20-week moving average before a final blow off top, maybe past 100K or so. So given that we might still be in a bull market, or not that we might still be in a bull market, but that the bull market might continue longer than anticipated for coins like Bitcoin and Ethereum, which has been on a tear, then I think that almost invalidates this kind of region right here, in the sense that HEX might just blast right through and overperform to levels we've never seen before on this HEX BTC chart, because the highest level we've been overextended was around 4.6x or so. Again, same region around over here when we had our local peak. This corresponded to that 23-24x on overextension on the HEX Ether chart. So 4.59, so 4.6x approximately, and we're only around 3x or so, which gives us room for another 50% move or so, which would put HEX at around 8 pennies. So that is that analysis for you. And why not? Let's go ahead and look at the last chart here, the heat map, our 100-day moving average weekly heat map. Well, you can tell that it's currently turning sort of green, right? And if we consider, well, maybe this is a fractal playing out compared to last year, well, where are we now? Again, we're at the green, which it was turning green here about halfway through our move, which is yet another indicator to try to time the top, which I don't recommend. This is just for fun. Like, all these videos are really just kind of to share my insights with the community, and do what you will with this. But again, never financial advice. Do your own research. Only invest what you're willing and affording to lose. Your generic disclaimer for this video. But we're green. right? We're green. We haven't even reached this purple, blue, or pink level. So I do think we still have some room to move up potentially to this 10-cent region. And you know what? I'll have to update these charts to accommodate for more room to the upside because we're kind of approaching the edge of the chart here. Yeah, again, we have our 200-day weekly moving average heat map and our 300-day. But then, as I've talked about before, the trade-off with these is that, well, we only get data after a certain amount of time. For example, on the 300-day moving average weekly percent change heat map, we only start getting data after 300 days. So you kind of have this trade-off of, you know, amount of data versus significance of data, right? So again, you can choose your favorite. Essentially, you could argue we are kind of overheated on this one, right? It's turning pink. On this one as well, the chart has turned pink. But maybe I'm biased, but I'm starting to grow a liking towards this 100-day because it encapsulates this move, whereas these don't. Again, I think that's kind of a big deal. If we're talking about this fractal being significant, well then I think it might be wise to include data of that fractal on the heat map if you're to say, let's look at the heat map. I hope that makes sense. But again, currently turning green, and that was about halfway through our expansion move over here, which kind of indicates to me, well, you know what? We've had about approximately a 7x from here, which we're considering this region right here to be this region over here. So, you know, what did we do back here? Let's actually take a look. Uniswap.hex.vision V1 for historical charts. And let's take a look at, we've talked about this, about a 10x once we broke all-time highs to the next all-time high. So what would a 10x from breaking this all-time high to the next one be? About 20 cents, right? So to think that we might reach 10 cents is actually a little conservative when you're looking at the fractal analysis, okay? And again, 10 cents converges with maybe it's a fractal playing out like this, but slightly diminishing returns, and a 10x from, or rather a 5x from previous all-time highs. So I do think we definitely still have room to grow, especially because we have momentum. I'll say that again and again, is that just look at this on a linear chart. It's just going straight up, right? Like if you'd called the top here, you were wrong. Call the top here, you were wrong. Call the top at 4 or 5 pennies, you were wrong. And so I think maybe calling the top at 6 pennies might not be smart because it'll go up until it doesn't, right? I know that probably sounds stupid, but it's really the truth. It's going to keep going up until it doesn't, right? And we've had dips along the way. And if we zoom in a little bit, let's actually take a look, have some fun. This is kind of getting to be a long video, but whatever. Let's give you guys some content. Let's look at the dips along the way. 18%. 32%. Wow, I actually didn't know we had a 32% dip during this run, so that's kind of interesting. Let's call this dip here a 30% dip. This here, 20%. What's this one? 17%, not bad. So this dip we currently had is on par for the course, man. Like, again, we've had in the past, literally in the past 2 weeks, we've had 6 dips. Prior to this current one, we've had 5 dips ranging anywhere from 17% all the way to 33%. So this current dip where we experienced of 23%, right? It's falls smack dab in the middle of this range. So again, this is completely normal for crypto, especially for a coin with, you know, little liquidity, if we're being honest, like HEX. Like, sure, $4 million is not a small amount of money, but in crypto it is, right? And we have a total of, I believe, like $10 million in liquidity when you add up the bid and the ask across, you know, Uniswap V1, V2, V3. Well, V1 doesn't really count anymore. No one used it. But yeah, that's pretty much it, right? Like we covered heat maps, HEX versus BTC, HEX versus Ether, regression rainbow, fractals, dips along the way. It's just momentum, right? It's a lot. It definitely is a lot. So I understand if sometimes these markets can get you feeling overwhelmed. Maybe should not look at the chart every single day if you're that kind of person. But you know what? We're just here to keep you updated on this channel. I hope you appreciate this kind of content. Again, shout out to everyone who's been sharing the lookintohex.com, which is what I use. I built the site, right? And I use it to pretty much display in an aesthetic way what I already have on my my Google Sheets. So definitely a lot happening right now. This bull market is heated, but crypto can go a lot higher than people think. Crypto can go a lot higher than people think. If you enjoy this kind of quantitative, technical hybrid analysis, leave a thumbs up. Definitely be subscribed by now. It's been 25 minutes, man. Hit that subscribe button. Appreciate watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.